I am supposed to speak 30 minutes. I know that I am right now the main obstacle between you and the lunch, so that I will go as faster as possible. Thank you very much for the invitation. Today, I will speak about what I call the Documedial Revolution. It's in fact a revolution much different from the other revolution that, by the way, took place exactly 1 century ago. Not exactly because of the difference of calendars, but nonetheless, it appears on the books that on October 26, 1917, happened something like this, not from here. Now, I want to suggest a mental experiment. What if those people were without memory? There were no documents, no photographs, no books, and nothing at all in general recording the event. What happened? There would not be no revolution. The day after, Kerensky enters again in his office, and then the Tsar stays in his palais, and nothing is happening. The reason that allows that social event like a revolution or money or holidays or university or conference or day of philosophy are allowed to exist strictly depend from the existence of documents and of recording. This is something existing from the very origin of humanity, but now something is changed, and this is what I call Documedial Revolution, that has been something as important as, say, the capitalistic revolution. To be fast, what I will speak in 26 October 2017, and only, note, only because we have records and memories of what happened 1 century ago, are 3 main things. The first 2 I would be very fast, the third would be a little more analyzed. First, what is a recorded act, and why recording and archives are so important in our society? For instance, this was an act, but its importance depends strictly from the fact that it has been recorded. Without recording, no event. Second, what is documentality? I will show it's not so complicated. And then, what is documediality? What is the object we are speaking about, I am speaking about, when I speak of Documedial Revolution? In order to explain what is a recorded act, we don't need to look to very ancient thing or to very abstract thing. It's sufficient to look at your mobile. This is the object they will speak about. And what is it? What is a cell phone? This seems to be a stupid question. Everybody knows what is a cell phone, everybody uses a cell phone. But maybe cell phone is more rich and complicated than we can imagine. And I suggest that if we understand what is a cell phone, we will understand what is social reality and the reason why we need so much a cell phone. Just a short story that has to do with the last 15 years, no more. First, this is an ancient or archaic cell phone, used also in, say, theological use. We can also imagine the situation. Seemingly is a true scene, namely the fact that there was someone at home in Jerusalem saying, if you go to the wall, please, I cannot go, but please, I should speak with him, maybe. And since you have a cell phone, you can do it. And this was the first use of the cell phone. The cell phone, at its appearance in the world history, was a landline phone without cable. And in a sense, it was an absolute object. Because if your problem is to phone, when you have a phone without the limitation of the cable, you don't need anything more. The object is perfect and does not need any further implementation. Was it so? Of course not. Because within few years, the machine for speaking became a machine for writing. And this is surprising, because usually we think that if we can speak, then we have to write. But if we can speak, we don't need to write. Here appeared something different. We had already the machine for speaking, and we transformed the machine for speaking into a machine for writing. And this in a way that surprised the most of also technicians and companies that introduced the system of text messaging. They were supposed that they would be used for saying how much credit you have or things like this. No one would never imagine that the most of the communication would be written instead of spoken. Wow, why? How so? How, if you have a phone, you use it to write? This is something to do with the Russian Revolution, surprisingly. Why? Because writing is recorded. Writing produces documents. The machine for speaking, which is an amnesic machine, changes into a machine for writing, and the machine for writing changes into an archive, a gigantic archive. We have here gigantic archives inside, gigantic memories that are connected to other gigantic archives. And this explains why there was this kind of evolution. This is not an ancient cell phone. It's a coffin with the shape of cell phone in Ghana. There is in Africa, there is an interesting artisanal skill. They built a coffin with the shape of a cell phone, of a Coca-Cola bottle, or Cadillac Impala. The question is, why to be buried into a cell phone? I have I have no answer for this point, but there are evidence of people who have been buried with a cell phone in their coffin. For instance, historical people. For instance, the American actor Tony Curtis was buried with his iPhone 3 in the coffin. The question is why? Because, as you know, the battery of iPhone 3 was very weak. Probably there is no field, and especially you are dead, so that you don't need a cell phone in order to communicate. And why so? Why having a cell phone in the grave? And the answer is pretty clear. If the cell phone was simply a medium of communication, then you will not need no cell phone in the grave, especially if you are dead. But if it is an archive of all social life in your life, then you became like the pharaoh who enters in the pyramid with all the memories of his own life. So, in this sense, to have a cell phone in the grave makes sense. Excuse me. Oh, how to come back? And, well, last part of this very short introduction, last metaphysical use of the cell phone, it's a grave with the shape of a cell phone in Israel. I don't know why they use it, but it is interesting because it gives a new meaning of the main question we make at the cell phone, namely, where are you? Because in a sense, it's obvious, I'm there. In another sense, who knows? But let's start to the second, let's go to the second point. So the question was, how and why we remember what happened in October 25 of last century, why we remember this right now, and this is because we are recording. And this shows, and I used the example of the cell phone in order to be clear on this topic, that documentality, the fact of having recorded documents, is the basis of social reality. I have a simple way of solving, for instance, the crisis between, which has been mentioned in the speech before, the crisis between President Trump and President Kim. How can be solved? I don't know, but one solution could be destroying all memory in the world, starting from the two, Kim and Trump, and then the rest of the humanity. The crisis will be solved because no one will recall what was going on during this time. This applies also for, say, economical crisis, but this does not apply, for instance, for physical situation. Even we all lose our memory. The temperature outside remains the same. It's not affected by our loss of memory. Well, this consideration leads me to say that the basis of social reality is documentality, and the constitutive rule of social objects, things like our conference, the state of Russia, or the names of the seas, money, and so on and so forth, follow the principle object is a recorded act. For instance, I am a physical object, but I am also an Italian citizen and a professor of the University of Turin. Those properties do not have to do directly with my body, but with some recorded act that stays in my documents, for instance. Something happened during my life that created this status via a recorded act. So, the definition is the social object is the result of a social act involving at least two people or a person and a delegated machine. Imagine when you buy a ticket on the web, the social object is produced by your interaction with a delegated machine that has the characteristic of being recorded, thereby acquiring the permanence typical of objectivity on any physical medium, in our head, in the so-called society without writing, on piece of paper, or on a computer, and whatsoever. Well, this is the situation, and the situation also shows that in order, imagine, well, again, the situation of the Russian Revolution, the Russian Revolution still exists as a social object on the basis of documentality. But this was the situation since the very beginning of humanity. We cannot conceive an humanity without documentality. Now, since about 15 or 20 years, something radical different happened that changed our life in a radical way, and this change I call a Documedial Revolution. What is the Documedial Revolution? What I call documediality is the union between the constitutive power of document, which is the documentality, and the dynamism of the media, the mediality. In which sense? In this sense, now, as I explained, any society needs documents, and this shows why archives, pyramids, monuments are so often used in society. The reason why we need banks. What is a bank? Is in a place in which they take gold? Of course not. They have documents, and this is the basis. And why at the end of the regime all the people tried to burn the documents? Because they show what happened during this regime, the existence of the regime. But now we dispose of these tools that multiplicate in a gigantic way the production of documents. What we call the so-called big data are documents that are produced each moment without any kind of intention of us by this kind of devices. This is the first question. So a quantitative increase of documentality. Since some decades ago, documents were things that we produced by will, complicated to produce, difficult to transfer. Now, automatic, without control, hyper-generating object. This is the first part, a quantitative increase of document without no parallel to any other period of human history. We will never have so many documents as nowadays. On the other hand, there is another character, the fact that this object is also the broadcaster. Any receiver of a message is in the same time a broadcaster, can be a broadcaster. And this also transforms the public opinion. For instance, the idea of public opinion became problematic because, for instance, I don't know how is the situation in Russia, but in Italy we have 30 million people on Facebook. This means that you have 30 millions of directors of newspapers making their own statements every day with the absolute idea to be right. And for instance, the idea of public opinion now is really problematic, because the public opinion is supposed to be a shared opinion, whereas we have no shared opinion at all. Or there is a kind of horizontality that has no common ground with the previous epoch. For instance, there are some difference between Hitler and Trump, but one specific difference is really important. The fact that Hitler has his own radio. It was the only way in Germany to speak. He was speaking and the rest of Germany was hearing. Whereas Trump uses Twitter like the rest of the world, so there is a kind of horizontality. Well, now I'm going to illustrate in 5 points, no more than 5 points, my main thesis. That is that documediality has transformed the social world with a rapidity and a magnitude whose only equivalent can be found in the capitalist revolution. Because when you read criticism of the web, you often see phrases like, well, the web is the last manifestation of capitalism. I am not sure of that, not because I am an enemy or a friend of capitalism or whatsoever, but because I believe that has been so many transformations from the epoch, 18th, 19th century of the capital and the present age, that sounds inappropriate of speaking of all times in terms of capitalism. And in order to show this point, I will illustrate 3 main differences between the capitalism and the documediality. First, document, not commodities. Capitalism was supposed to produce commodities. People entered in the industries producing objects. Now, the principal product is done nowadays, and the principal good that people pay for is documents. The documents produced in this gigantic, free, in the sense that people are not paid, factories which are social network. When we are on the social network, we think about the self are free players for something. No, we are not paid workers producing a gigantic amount of wealth, and this gigantic amount of wealth consists in documents and not in commodities. Note that in this sense, the transformation of the commodities into documents is the realization of the intuition of Marx, the intuition of the fact that the commodity is a social relation between men that assumes derives the fantastic form of a relation between things. In a sense, it's the pure manifestation. When I have this, consider this as a commodity, is not evident that is the reification of a relation between people. But when I have a message inside, it's very clear that is the reification of relation between things. So there is this continuity and the creation of the document as the absolute commodity. In a sense, you remember that in Capital, the most frequent word in Capital is not capitalism, machine, or alienation, is cotton, linen, canvas. He always makes this example because the industry he refers to is industry producing texture. But in a sense, this web, the web we have nowadays, is the manifestation of the essence of this other web, namely the relation between persons transformed into things. Second, differentiation. Mobilization, not loud. There is a huge difference between the man going in a factory and the man staying on the social network. The huge difference is that the man going in a factory is paid and the other don't. And this is really interesting because we have a huge mobilization of work, forces, intelligence, energy that has no consequence, no previous example. For instance, 40 years ago, no one of you will be working 2 times as you do now, because you are in the same time hearing a lecture, which is a kind of work, and answering your mail, which is the second work. I suppose that none of two is paid. This is the advantage, the disadvantage, but this is interesting. What is the reason for? What is the reason that creates this compulsive way of working on the web? Because I suggest to call this work mobilization because it has no goals and no payment, but is a kind of sacrifice. Not that, for instance, Marx in the Capital says about the bad capitalist that makes it that some children work during the night, and sometimes it could succeed, the bad capitalist, to making children working during the night. But now, and it is not the bad capitalist, all the children work during the night. All the children during the night work on this kind of object. And this without any kind of, say, impulsion of capitalism. This kind of mobilization that makes they are following a kind of rule. What is the reason of this? Again, it's not payment, and they buy their own medium of production. Third, recognition, not sustenance. This is the main difference. The reason why people act today is much more the recognition than the sustenance. Of course, recognition is a central feature of a human being. Hegel spoke a lot of recognition, and many other people spoke a lot of recognition, but we see right now how relevant is recognition. We never saw with such an evidence, because often the work had payment and then recognition. Here you have no payment, but just recognition, no sustenance, but just recognition. There is a symbol very clear of this attitude, which is the selfie. And note, the selfie should not be considered in any case a form of narcissism. There is a false interpretation of the selfie suggesting that the selfie is the modern narcissism. No, it's not the modern narcissism at all, because, look, this is Narcissus. Narcissus is not connected. Narcissus just look at his image and that's all. If I take a selfie, I am trying to be recognized potentially by the rest of the world. So it's the contrary, it's the opposite of a narcissistic attitude. It's begging for recognition, not being narcissistic. Also because we have a selfie, two persons, so by narcissism is complicated, then group narcissism is complicated, or narcissism with monuments is complicated, and object narcissism, for instance, there is a sense in which also when people take a photograph of the pizza they are eating, they make a selfie because they want to say, I am here, I am eating this pizza, please recognize me. So it's not a narcissism. I suppose that the narcissist would eat a pizza without any interest for the rest of the world. In this case, on the contrary, I make a delay from my eating pizza and the pizza in itself because I want to show the fact to other people. Fourth point, self-affirmation and not alienation. This is maybe the most interesting point that shows, and this is an homage to what happened 1 century ago close to us, that in fact there are aspects of our society that are by no means the continuation of capitalist society, but are the realization of the communist society. They are part of our life right now, which is the realization of communist society. This seems to be surprising because I believe that your country attempted to realize a communist society during some decades, and well, this was the attempt. And now, this attempt is not, say, in the center of political agendas right now, but is being realized. Why? Because there is no more distinction between wartime and lifetime. People looking at their mobile phones right now, I see there are many of them. I don't know whether they are making something which is related to their private life or labor life. There is no more such difference, because when you are in a factory working like Chaplin in modern times, there's no doubt that you are working, and no doubt that you are alienated, in the sense that you are doing the same gesture for 10 hours, all the day long, all the life long, and this was alienation, typical of capitalist society condemned by Marx. On the very opposite, there was the ideal communist society that Marx described, for instance, in German ideology, in this famous passage describing the life of people in a Schillerian communist society. communist society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have in mind, without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. Does this situation recall something to you? It's our situation. Right now we are in this situation because every one of us does a work and then makes other works. Most of people change their works several times in their life, and every one of us posts on social media critical critics of criticism, and every one of us, well, now hunting is a little bit, hunting is a little bit out of fashion, but for instance, there is traveling, low-cost companies. And this is what happens. Are we happy? Of course not, because we are not stupid. But this has much to do with the communist society than with the capitalist society. Avoid any kind of axiology or value in this, but from an analytical point of view, is it so? And then I come to my last slide, which is atomization and not classes. Other difference from the capitalist epoch. Because what happened? There is really the Documedial Revolution produced a society without classes. We are in a society without classes. And this shows, for instance, because post-truth is so common in our epoch. Because before, it's not that all the people were possessing the truth, but there was a huge church, religious church, political church, sharing the same conviction. And this creates the idea of an homogeneity of truth inside the community. But since the community has disappeared and we have just individuals, then those individuals has his own right, is convinced of being right, and this is post-truth. I would say that post-truth is not President Trump, it's every one of us entering in the web with his own conviction. There is a philosophical advantage in this, namely the fact that, for instance, in Italy, philosophy is taught also in secondary school, which is easy for some philosophers, very uneasy for other philosophers. For instance, Leibniz. There is a moment in which, in the classroom, enters the professor and speaks about monads, and then explains what a monad is. He says is a center of force that represents all the universe without having any doors or window, and that's all. What is a monad? No one understands what is a monad, and you cannot even ask the professor what is a monad, because the professor too ignores what is a monad, so remains in the adolescent of every Italian student the mystery of monads. Now the mystery of monads is solved because it's very clear what a monad is. Any one of us, a center of force, representing all the universe, World Wide Web, with its own perspective, and this creates post-truth. Thank you very much.
Вопросы, пожалуйста. Поднимайте руки, у кого есть вопросы.
Вопросов? Вопросов пока нет.
Вопрос.
Татьяна Владимировна, пожалуйста.
А я буду по-английски говорить. Is internet a huge monad?
Yes?
Is it?
Yes, it's the monad of the monads.
Yes, I see.
Спасибо.
Еще вопросы?
Влада Шиповалова, СПГУ Англии.
Влада Владимировна Шиповалова, заведующая кафедрой философии и логики.
It's not important. So, thank you very much, Professor. And my question is about terminology. Can I interpret your documentation in relation to representation, which discussed in social epistemology, modern social epistemology by Lynch, Fuller, and other? If not, what's the main difference between these two concepts? Thank you.
The concept
Representation.
of representation. Well, there are no difference except this, the fact that representation is, I would say, a more generic term than documentation that omits to underline how important are the technical instruments of recording. Representation applies for an image I have in my head, a shared combination between you and me, but documentation shows the public and performative value of this. Because with the documents I have in my pocket, I can enter Russia, which is not the case. With my representation, I suppose that I will not be there.
Спасибо. Есть еще вопросы?
Поблагодарим профессора Феррариса.
My questions about the revolution. Under good conditions, can the revolution be justified?
Revolution is what happens, so there are no way of justifying revolution. I mean, it's more an event than, and in this sense, it needs no revolution, and no justification, I'm sorry. Because if I go to the king and I say, excuse me, you want to do a revolution, he will say, no, you don't. So I have to do the revolution without justification.
Thank you.
Thank you.